So hello, welcome back to the bunker, and today we've got a very special guest in none other than the new Aston Martin V12 Vantage. Now, only 333 of these cars are being made. This one is around about £285,000, sir, and they've wedged in a V12 engine pretty much from the DBS into what was originally a V8 platform. So in a minute, we're going to take it for a drive and share with you exactly how this monstrous, near 700 brake horsepower, twin turbocharged V12 engine sounds and feels. But before we do, it would only be right to give you a top-line overview of all of the tweaks and changes that make this thing so expensive and so special. Okay, let's not beat around and start with the defining feature of this car, which is, of course, that there, the 5.2 litre V12 twin turbo. Now, interestingly, look how far back that sits. That is proper positioning for a proper car. A good proportion of this engine actually goes underneath the dashboard itself. So the sound when we're inside will be interesting, but more importantly, for me, the balance of the car should feel good too. Sitting relatively high, but in terms of positioning in the car, this almost looks like a front mid-engine rather than a full front engine car. So physics-wise, should be good. Before we close this new bonnet, every paddle on this car, with I think the exception of the doors, is bespoke to this car. And check this out. This entire bonnet here is a single piece of carbon fiber. Now they do something really cool on the design of this to accentuate it. Look at that there. This is painted here to match up with this cooling line. So this is cooling here. Under there, the radiator and the cooling fan is huge. But all of this, it's just this beautiful highlighted exposed carbon fiber. On the topic of aesthetics, the car is wider, lower, but a big proportion of the way that the revised aesthetics exist is because of revised aero. Now at over 150 miles an hour, or actually at 150 miles an hour, the revised aero generates 205 kilograms of downforce. So, you know, not a small gesture. That is a significant upgrade. And they've achieved that by things like this. They have a elongated front carbon splitter, this quite advanced air curtain here. This is designed to act as a release duct for the air, the high pressure air that builds up in the wheel arch here, that diffuses out down the side of this blade here. Sometimes you'll see the equivalent of that in vanes which come out on top of the wheel arch in something like a GT3 RS, but Aston have integrated it behind this aero blade here. And the purpose of this is to keep the air tucked in against the side of the car. And then at the rear, we have an optional carbon fiber rear wing and pretty aggressive rear diffuser. All of that adds up to 205 kilograms of downforce at around about 150 miles an hour. Now, join me down here. We have 21-inch forged wheels, big in themselves, but what's really interesting to me is this brand here. Not because we are a partner of Michelin, but genuinely, this is the first time that I have seen a modern-day Aston roll out of the factory on Michelin rubber. So this is a great sign. I mean, generally, when you look at people who are going for performance records, take, for example, around the Nürburgring, it's generally on this rubber right here. So that is encouraging in itself. And behind there sit over 400 millimeters of carbon ceramic disc. But despite this being dressed in a lot of carbon fiber, you'd be forgiven for thinking that it would therefore be a lightweight car. Actually, it's just shy of 1,800 kilograms, which to me doesn't sound the best, but we'll reserve judgment until we get out on the track, because with 700 horsepower, 1,800 kilograms might still feel acceptable. Okay, nothing dramatically changed on the interior, but the biggest feature has to be these new seats. These originated in the Vanquish Zagato GT. They made just 19 of those. Then they made their way down into the Aston Martin Speedster, you know, the one with no roof at all. They looked very cool, and now they are in the V12 Vantage. They're awesome. I'd like to see them in a lot more cars, but until then, they're exclusive to this car. And then small, but actually quite practical detail, this pull tag here on the seats, this allows you to move the seat backwards and forwards like that. Seems like a small detail, but actually it's right there, and it makes it super easy rather than going down here and fumbling around with where your little lever might be. There's also a slightly revised infotainment architecture down here, similar to what's found in the new DBX 707, connected to a 7-speed automatic gearbox. I say automatic, not to be confused with a twin clutch box. It'll be interesting to see what the relationship with this box is Vantages and that V12 engine. And there is here as well some more sort of intricate detailing on the door cards. It's all very new age Aston Martin. Anyway, for me, it's all defined by the way this thing drives. So on we go. Okay, so here we go, out on our tight little undulating bumpy track, and that's kind of why this circuit that we've got on our doorstep is really cool. Is it basically replicates what our Great British B roads are like. Read between the lines, terrible, but that keeps it pretty real world, right? So here we are in the all new, menacing looking, near 700 brake horsepower, good lord, V12 Aston Martin Vantage. Just 333 of these cars are being made. Wow, that picks up pace, that moves. Yes, just 333 of these cars, which makes it, well, pretty rare, really. And interestingly, despite the fact that they have put this thing on a carbon fiber diet, the car still weighs a not particularly impressive 1,800 kilograms, or 1,795 kilograms to be precise. Now, I'm wondering if it's sort of a victim of its own success, really, in that putting a V12 engine in a small car kind of means adding more mass to the car by way of adding 4 more cylinders and a larger block over the standard V8 variation. But as a result, vast amounts of torque and 700 horsepower, which in any money is good fun. But what we like from a driver's car is more power, less weight, and the less weight thing they've not really hit. To compensate that, there are carbon ceramic brakes, and yeah, they do the business. They shed off some speed, and importantly, because it's carrying quite a lot of mass, they're not going to fade on you, which is always a bonus when you've got a car capable of 200 miles per hour. Now, they have made this car, and you might be able to tell by my body movements in this seat, but as you might be able to see me jiggling and shaking around, as a result of making this car 50% stiffer at the front and 40% stiffer at the rear, I've got to actually say, I think it's too stiff. Now, I know why they've done it. This is obviously a more driver-focused, I guess lap-time-focused car. There's clear evidence that they've tried to revise the aero in this with the addition of the wing and revised aero, front and rear diffuser, front splitter, etc. But it's just a bit too stiff. Now, it's a funny one because the actual platform it's based on is ultimately a GT car, a Grand Tourer, and I can't quite work out if by making it stiffer as a basically more supercar, sports car focused ethos, I'm not sure it overly suits the character of the car. It is genuinely too stiff, and I say that because the mode I'm in right now is this softest suspension setting. This is in its GT mode. I've not even pressed Sport yet. So if I tap this up to Sport Plus, everything sort of sharpens up, and you can, thankfully, independently control the suspension settings from the drivetrain and engine characteristic settings. So effectively being able to put it in Sport Plus and keep it in GT suspension mode. Honestly, I can't ever see a reason, unless you're on Silverstone where the circuit surface is billiard smooth. I mean, I've just tapped it. Look at that. Can you see me shaking around? I'm in Sport Plus suspension now. Oof. I mean, if you ever had a loose tooth and you didn't want to go and visit the dentist, hop in a V12 Vantage in Sports Plus. It will shake out your molars. Good lord. I'm sure it's great on a smooth track, but on a surface like this, I don't know. I think it's a bit too stiff, but anyway, the power kind of makes up for it. You put your foot in now, and when it gains traction, now here's the other thing. Traction control, way too invasive. Now I say that because I'm on a track, I'm able to put in my foot. If it was wet, you'd want every bit of that traction, but with this effectively being the engine from the DBS, it has the same character trait of the DBS, which is just way too much torque and not enough grip. I'm not saying it's not fun. I mean, one of the things they've really worked on, the front end turn-in. Behold this nose. You ready? Crikey, under braking, under turn-in. I mean, it loves a bit of trail braking. Like, to carry the weight in on the nose, these PS4S, I mean, it's got grip. It has grip for days. Crikey. Yeah, if you know how to play with the physics of it, it's there, for sure. The ceramics as well. But the traction control just, it's not putting the power down. What's the point? It's got the power, but it won't put it down unless it's billiard smooth. That's effectively it. Then in comes all of that power and it slingshots you out once the traction control has got itself in order. I've got to press that suspension back to GT mode. It's just too much. I can't even talk to you right. I'm shaking me around. Hey, dear me, I'm not sure, lads. Sound. Outside, we revved it up in the bunker studio earlier. I've got to say, the exhaust note on the outside, it doesn't sound turbocharged. It is incredible. It sounds almost like a naturally aspirated V12. It's got that signature 12-cylinder howl that you get from the naturally aspirated stuff. But inside, it's got a nice purr, but I'm not sure it's particularly distinctively a V12 over, say, the V8. I mean, the V8 Vantage is a wonderfully balanced car. Yeah. And here's the other thing. The gearbox. Because it's now got a sports car chassis, near supercar actually, you want to drive it that way. But sadly, the gearbox doesn't quite match up to it. And oftentimes I'll pull down on the downshift paddle under heavy braking, and the engine and the gearbox aren't quite there yet because there's not enough revs available and it's not a twin clutch box. Now, I'm sure with all of the bits turned off, all of the safety features, all of the traction control, and I can tell by the way the traction control button is flashing at me like it's speaking to me in Morse code, that it is doing its very best of keeping all of this mass and torque in check. But turn it off? I mean, even I don't want to turn it off here. It feels like it would be a terrifying experience. Now, if I slow things down a notch, I mean, right now on our tight circuit, it's probably not suited to it here. It probably needs a Silverstone. But I like it because we've tested countless cars here, so it's an interesting benchmark for me as to how familiar bumps feel. But it is really quite similar to your average British B road, which genuinely isn't that well paved, and I just think it's a bit stiff, really. As a GT car, you know, if you got this on the continent, it would be amazing because, well, generally you got better tarmac over there and it would destroy miles. Like, for something to waft on down to the south in, you know, it's still the same platform as a V8 Vantage, so great boot space, wonderful comfort and refinement. It's got that typical Aston polish inside. It is, of course, a beautiful place in which to spend time. But is it better for having a V12 in it? On the outside, reading its specs, you would say, yes, can't wait to get behind the wheel of a V12 Vantage, but for the first time, I'm not sure it is. It's brilliant that they've made it. It really is. I think it's fantastic because the world needs more cars like this. But is it better for it? I'm not sure if it's better, but it's definitely a more unique proposition. And of course, only making 333 of them means it's also a much more exclusive proposition as well. Meaning the chances of you pulling up in a car park or even to a car meet and having someone draw up alongside you in a V12 Vantage has surely been reduced. But if you're expecting to use this as a track day car, well, take it to Silverstone and find some smooth tarmac. And if you want to take it down a bumpy B road in the wet, keep the traction control up. there we have it. Look, listen, the thing is an absolute riot. I mean, ultimately, it's a 700 horsepower V12, but out there on our circuit, it's probably not totally representative of, you know, taking it on every road. But importantly, I think this would still come alive on a proper road trip. Like a long grand tour would be amazing. So Aston, if you're actually throwing me the keys for a European road trip, I'll gladly take a look and see how it handles itself on something like that. But at least on our circuit over there, honestly, that surface, it's very similar to the B roads out there. It's not great, and it doesn't deal with it that well. It is quite stiff. I felt the traction control intervened too much, and the gearbox is more suited to a Grand Tour experience. And on that, I think its home probably is still out on the road, despite the fact that it has revised aero for greater downforce, carbon stripe brakes, etc. But all of that aside, as a place to be and a sense of occasion, ticks the boxes hard. So I'd love to spend some more time in it, and yeah, it's still quite a fitting goodbye to the end of this platform. So questions and comments below. As always, thanks so much for watching, and we shall see you next time. Ciao!